Hey there, welcome to this video. And this video is going to be called I Hate Lou Reed, So I Listened to Transformer. Transformer being one of his famous albums, perhaps his most famous albums, containing his two biggest hits. Who the hell's Lou Reed, you might ask? You won't ask that. Someone I hate. But he came to prominence in Velvet Underground. He was the main guy in that, the main singer, songwriter. And I have admitted elsewhere that he is a good songwriter. And as a songwriter, he is rooted in a sort of Tin Pan Alley style, which is quite conservative. But actually, by combining that with some sort of pretentious, we don't need to learn how to play our instruments type of approach, lots of jangliness, combined with lots of drug taking and songs about all sorts of things that at the time people weren't allowed to sing about, has turned him into some cult figure. And although he may have some sort of cultural relevance, perhaps, he, in reality, musically, is not as great as everybody thinks. And that sort of pretentiousness that I see in his work, I hate. Right? Now, that's me giving quite a rational, reasonable description of why I hate him. But it's more than that. I think if I carried on talking to you wearing these dark sunglasses in this way, unless I was blind, you may start to think the fact that I'm wearing them on this video in this manner means that I am a tosser. And I think I would be if I was to do that. Because what do these dark sunglasses mean? Right? Does it mean that I'm blinded by the light? No, it doesn't. What it means is I'm cool and I am withdrawn and I have some sort of rock and roll, Nietzschean otherness that you should see as being worthy. And maybe it was worthy at some point, but I think it's a little bit tosserish now to sit and present yourself like this. So I will take them off and put on my other glasses. Now, there you go. Now, there I am. Right, from Superman to Clark Kent, Although I am modelling myself a little bit more on a sort of mid-period Larry Coryell, I do need to grow the hair a little bit longer for that. But that's the last time you're going to get reference to jazz rock fusion here on this video. No, this is designed to bring people in and watching my channel, because as soon as I say I hate someone, they're in. But I think people enjoyed the fact that I put my prejudice aside and sat down and listened to one of these albums by one of these people I don't like, and listened to in an open mind, which I have done. And I've taken the album Transformer. Now, you might want to say why. The last time I did this, it was for Neil Young. I chose Harvest. And then we'll go, that's the middle of the road one. You should have picked one of the ones which is more dirtier and down in the ditch stuff, where he basically starts to do what I don't like. And I wanted to give Mr. Young a chance. And I want to give Lou Reed a chance. Because, believe it or not, in 18... Let's do that bit again. Believe it or not, in 1997, Transformer was named the 44th greatest album of all time in a Music of the Millennium poll conducted in the United Kingdom by HMV, Channel 4, The Guardian and Classic FM. 4 awful organisations, if I've ever heard of them. I'm going to do this bit with the glasses on because, as you go aware, I'm doing what normal YouTubers do now, and just reading stuff out that's pre-planned. Right, I got some notes here, so you can't see my eyes. Look, I can now look like I'm talking to you, but I could just, now I'm a bloody varifocus. I've got to go over to the side a little bit. Now I look like that bloke out of Peters and Lee. That's the last blind bloke. There's a list of blind blokes. That's always the problem with dark sunglasses, isn't it? Is you're going to end up looking like, maybe it's Stevie Wonder you're going to end up looking like, or maybe Ray Charles, and I don't mind looking like them, but that's not going to happen, is it, But Peters and Lee, I don't want to look like the bloke out of Peters and Lee, although he did pull a reasonable bird there, didn't he, old Peters and Lee? But did he know? Right, stop with the blind jokes. They're not funny. This is the bloody 21st century. Blind jokes went out with bloody Les Dawson. Come on, move on. In 2000, it was voted number 58 in Colin Larkin's all-time top 1,000 albums, 58. Transformer is also ranked at number 55 on the NME's list of greatest albums of all time. And in 2003, the album was ranked at number 194 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. That's bloody low, that is 194 for the Rolling Stone, maintaining the rating in a 2012 revised list and then being ranked at 109 in the 2020 list, one that we have gone over in detail here. So they've put it up. That makes total sense. Also in Q Magazine's list, it came in one of the greatest 100 albums ever made. So we are did now. I'll take those off now. So it'll look like I just remembered all that, when I was actually reading it. And anybody who comes to my channel, yes, I make mistakes. I do at some point impart the wrong information. Sometimes I just get my words wrong. I mean, I say sometimes. A lot of the times I get my words wrong, and it'll take you down a blind alley if you follow that. Exactly what I'm saying. Never trust what I'm saying 100%. Those of you who are new to the channel, go and check the description. Look at the oath/promise that I've put there. Right, so take it all with a pinch of salt, William. But what I am going to do, me being a trained musician, a professional musician that played on albums and all that type of stuff, a multi-instrumentalist, and I know my theory and my chops, and I do have an ear for more the sort of progressive rock and classic rock and jazz rock fusion, things where people are playing and creating great riffs and great arrangements and all that. I tend to put the musical attributes first above the lyrics, or even worse, how bloody cool it is perceived by the elite bloody establishment music critics that know nothing about music, the sort of types that have placed this album in the 100 greatest albums ever made. Ever made. Think about it. This is not just a good album, and I've listened to it, and it's not a bad album. I would describe this as not a bad album. Actually, it's not a bad album. And there's bits on it I really, really liked. But in the top 100. So let's have an explore, shall we? It starts up with a track called Vicious. Now, this came to Lou Reed, I believe, from a bit of inspiration from Andy Warhol, a character that hangs over Lou Reed's early work like a ghost. The guy that championed the Velvet Underground and gave him the aspects of a bit of sort of, I don't know, a sort of fakery that then was utilised so greatly by Malcolm McLaren with the Sex Pistols. A shame, really, because John Lydon is an incredible songwriter, and Lou Reed is as well. But there is this idea of just blank product that you have with the Velvet Underground, as the sort of pop art, rock band, all sunglasses and cool haircuts and posing and doing all the right things. And I think that is the problem that unseats Lou Reed and stops him from being the songwriter he could have been. Although I think in terms of his legacy is down to these more shallower aspects. The fact that he sang about subject matter, people on the wrong side of the establishment back then. People have now since been championed and held up as being, part of identity groups that we must not question, absolute. But actually back then when he was singing songs about these people, sort of people that wouldn't normally get a song about them, but in this sort of Tin Pan Alley way, that's quite powerful stuff, actually. And as I taught my way through it, I've just elevated. I was about to have a go at that, but no. This idea of singing a song about somebody who is vicious, that Andy Warhol, he put the idea, he said something like, sing a song about someone who is vicious, someone who would attack you with a flower. So that's what we get. Now, for me, with my ears, the track starts up with this horrible 2-chord start, right? This is rock and roll, but not the sort of visceral rock and roll that we have with AC/DC or Black Sabbath. These guys don't know how to rock. This is weak. It's rock and roll, but intellectual rock and roll. Okay? Rock and roll for people who want to champion music made by people who don't have the sort of skill and facility to rock and to roll. I wasn't impressed at all. The rhythm section comes in, it's wobbly, the tempo's going up and down, the drums are indistinct, the production's all not that great, and I expected a little bit more for this album, as we'll get to in a minute, but yeah, it's all over the place. It's pepped up by quite a catchy pre-chorus, but this sort of two-chord rock and roll, and what am I supposed to do? Sit with the lyrics and appreciate all this stuff he's singing about? I don't. I started to find this tune tedious. So the great intent of this album, which is is pushed out there on the first track, straight off, I'm like, ugh. And it's not that I hate it. It's just after a few minutes of this, I'm bored. My ears haven't got anything to latch onto. There's nothing attractive in there. There's nothing groovy. There's nothing catchy or... Now, you might say it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and what do you know? Well, I don't know about that, people. You see, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Maybe simple people whose ears are quite uneducated and are happy to listen to simple things, to tap it along and get some enjoyment out of it. Perhaps the deep enjoyment that we can get from Bach or from John Coltrane, or Nick Drake, to point at a songwriter, the beautiful music that can exist, the profound experience that music can give us. I'm not getting it from this. Am I an elitist? Or is that just me? Of course it's just me. I'm no better from anybody else, but that's what I want. I want music that is musically bloody rich and full, and this isn't for me. The next tune starts up, and from a songwriting point of view, there's more there, let us say. And as this tune starts up, I think, I've heard this before, and I realise it's the sort of Walk on the Wild Side cadence, the most basic cadence, or the second most basic cadence, the one chord to the fourth chord over and over again. But the drums kick in. It's a lovely drum sound. I think the guy drumming on this is a guy called, is it John Halsall? Anyway, is it John Halsall? Who I know as the drummer with Pato, and also played with the Ruttles alongside Ollie Halsall, the virtuoso guitarist that is perhaps the most underrated guitarist in the history of guitarists. Is he related? I don't know. I should have researched this a little bit more. But the drumming's nice here and the production's great. At this point, I'm thinking, who's created such a wonderful drum sound? Every time I do a video, the stand that I've created for my device that gives me a little bit of colour in my cheeks, my reflector, keeps collapsing on every single video. It's becoming a thing now, but that's the way it is. I'm not going to put it back. I'm going to keep on going. So I check out the engineer who's created this great drum sound. It is the best there is, Ken Scott. Ken Scott, who's the guy behind Spectrum by Billy Cobham. He's behind bloody... all the Mahavishnu Orchestra albums, well, not all of them, but all the good ones, the ones that sound good, Birds of Fire and Visions of the Emerald Beyond. A guy that I have met, and I spent the whole time asking him about what it was like engineering Visions of the Emerald Beyond, or what Tommy Bolin was like, not realising that this bloke has also engineered Perfect Day and Walk on the Wild Side. And that's what starts to become apparent. The genius of Ken Scott here. And you start to go, yeah, this is a nice little tune. It's not great, but it's okay. But the sound and production, especially for this moment in time, is so great that I'm even drawn to that. I love it. And this is a little bit like the Harvest album. I love the production on that, especially around the drums, and I'm loving it here. But, the first song I didn't like, this one's okay. It's okay. And then it goes into Perfect Day, which we all know. But I have to be honest, here in the UK, a few years ago, or many years ago now, they decided to do this great big BBC video where they got Lou Reed singing Perfect Day, and then they got all these other people singing it, and they stuck a gospel choir on it, and they gave it all the bloody works, didn't they? And everybody loved it. And that's what I have in my head. So going back to the original produced one, which is starker, it's rich compared to the stuff on this album. It's not that stark, but the starkness is utilised. It's much more beautiful in a way. Of course, this tune is one of the greatest songs of all time. When I say Lou Reed's a great songwriter, it's this song I've got in mind when I say it. I've got some notes here as I listen to it. And what I put is it starts up and we have bass, piano and vocals, right? Really simple, right? The piano is being played by Mick Ronson because this album was produced by David Bowie and Mick Ronson. Now, David Bowie, we know, has an ear for, like Madonna, what is culturally relevant at that time. And he can do that at a sort of almost art level. And that really exists in the sort of poppiness that Bowie could bring, which still maintains the sort of coolness. But Mick Ronson, here we have this working class bloke from up north. I think he was discovered bloody pushing one of them paint things over a football pitch, But this guy had been a trained violinist as a kid and was an incredible guitarist, but more importantly, an incredible musician. And the piano playing on this is absolutely the touch and the way it's done. You go, well, here we have Mick Ronson. He's a bloody genius. Bowie's a genius. Mick Ronson's a genius. So Lou Reed, is he a genius? I don't know. But Ken Scott is, Bowie is, and Mick Ronson. And suddenly we start to feel this around these songs. This could well be the greatest produced album ever made. Is this the case that these are okay-ish songs elevated to genius by the people around them? Or is it a case that there is genius in Lou Reed? I don't know. Then comes in this beautiful string arrangement by Mick Ronson. This is astonishing. I've had so many people message me, go, why are you going to do something on Mick Ronson? And I think, well, he's a good guitarist. I like his play, but I'm not a fan of the, Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from on. Never have been. But listening to him on here, I suddenly went, oh my God, this guy's incredible. The chorus suddenly explodes out of the mix. And I've written here, genius production, genius songwriting. I put Mick Ronson, genius piano and strings arrangements, as is Ken Scott, sublime music, as good as it gets. This is wonderful, right? I could have this on, if I had a big album of all my favourite songs, A Perfect Day was on there, I wouldn't balk at it. Even though I can't stick this bloody neck of the woods musically, this is fantastic. Now, is it the case that this song has elevated this album up? Right? Because it's followed up by a tune called Hanging Round. We get this sort of glam rock punk sound come in. Now, this album's also acting, as I think, as a touchstone for glam rock and a precursor to punk. Now, glam rock, we could say that that's probably Mud or the Glitter Band. Even Gary Glitter, we could say that was that in the UK. Sweet, that was glam rock. Alvin Stardust. But at the other end, you got David Bowie, and maybe right in the heart of it, we have what is going on this album. Because this, when it's rocking, is very glammy. And that hit me because that was the music that I can remember first hearing as a kid, dry production sound. And I've got a quote here. Who's the quote from? Don't know. Right, I've got this quote here, and it's this. Reed himself says he thinks this album's great. I don't think it's nearly as good as he's capable of doing. He seems to have the abilities to come up with some really dangerous, powerful music, stuff that people like Jagger and Bowie have only rubbed their knees with. Right? This is a bloke called Nick Touches, I think, for Rolling Stone magazine. That chimes a little bit with me, although he wants to err on going, maybe he is a genius, but is it really evidenced here or not? But what he is doing, he's doing something that the likes of Jagger and Bowie, aren't quite doing. This is a little bit further out. And I think that way of understanding this album, but for me, the question is, how good is Lou Reed? How good is he? That's the point. But, this tune's okay. The bass playing's lovely on it. We got Herbie Flowers on this album. And Herbie Flowers is the next genius on this album that seems to have come in and gone, well, you want me to do this? Would you want to try that? And I'll do this. And he keeps coming up with bloody genius. Not just on the bass, but on the bloody tuba as well. And without that tuba, I don't know whether people would perceive this album as being as great as it is. All this stuff's wonderful. So, this is the theme of the album. Is this an okay album propped up by brilliant arrangement and production? Or is it genius? well, Perfect Day is pretty strong, isn't it? This hanging around after a while gets a bit boring. I don't think this is sublime, brilliant music whatsoever. So as we come up to the last song on side one, which is of course the also iconic Walk on the Wild Side, again, this is an example of okay songwriting made great by the arrangements and production. This song's iconic, but really it's almost like a rap tune where, Lou Reed just sort of talks his way. And when I say rap, it's closer to Rex Harrison in My Fair Lady than it is to, LL Cool J. But he sort of talks his way through in a very iconic way, drawing attention to countercultural icons, right? Exploring the other side. And I think culturally, what is a very simplistic pop song is elevated at that time by the subject matter. I've put here, the songwriting itself is a bit naff. Now that phrase I think describes exactly the aspect of Lou Reed's songwriting I distrust. Whereas Herbie Flowers has put a double bass line down and electric bass line, which are acting in opposition. Everyone thinks it's just that iconic bass line, but it's not. When you listen to it, it's actually two bass lines moving against each other. It's a work of absolute genius. And of course, famously, the bloke got paid 17 quid for coming up with that. What makes this song great? Rick Beato always asks that question. Herbie bloody Flowers. That's what makes this song great. Ken Scott also, there's this, when he says the coloured ladies song, I don't know if he said the word ladies, and you get that boop, ba-dip, 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 boop. You're right, very iconic. But if you actually listen to it, what Ken Scott does is he puts it right in the background and dry, and then he brings it out into your view and into reverb as well. It's an incredible effect. So yeah, it's made great by the people around him. Now, I know that David Bowie started off as a saxophone player, and I wonder whether the inclusion of saxophone into this was a suggestion of David Bowie, because he then goes and gets his saxophone teacher, the great Ronnie Ross, who was a stalwart of the British jazz scene, who does that famous sax solo, which if you listen to it, sounds like a very deft and beautiful tenor sax solo. That's on baritone sax, an instrument which is pretty bulky and hard to get that sort of beauty out of. And that in itself, as the tune goes out over this incredible bass line, that beautiful saxophone solo that is so rich, it's not just some honking blues pentatonic thing. What Ronnie Ross does there is imbue a delicacy to the use of this great big hulking instrument, which I think it echoes with the sentiments of what the beauty that Lou Reed is perhaps trying to reveal in these characters. Imploring us into this world. It's a great song, but I honestly think this is style over content. And the reason why it became iconic is it just happened to tick a box at the time culturally. So I do think that, on this album, it's not bad. There's some okay tunes, punctuated by Perfect Day and Walk on the Wild Side. Turn the album over and you get up into a tune called Makeup. Now, again, okay songwriting. I keep writing this. Okay songwriting. Not bad. Okay. Goodish. Good. It's okay. It's okay. But this track's made amazing by the arrangements. The arrangement is incredible. And I put all these tunes, a brilliant team dressing up the songwriting which had salacious lyrics at the time, which gave it an edge. Is that what we're dealing with here? And now when we've heard everything and, everyone's explored every aspect and swore and said every word, that kick's not there anymore. So we're left just with the tunes. And the tunes are a little bit twee and the tunes are a little bit naff for me. Herbie Flowers crops up on side 2 on tuba. Who did the arrangement for this? Is this Mick Robson or is it Herbie Flowers? Because the tuba just makes it. It starts to point to a much older style of music, a style of pre-rock and roll. Obviously, some sort of early jazz style is floating behind some of these arrangements, and that starts to chime with me. And I start to try and zone in on that. I will talk about that later as we get into this. Then we have a tune called Satellite of Love, which was written in 1970 when he was in Velvet Underground, perhaps, searching around for something that might add a bit more pop appeal. For me, this is where the tedium sets in. By this point, I've heard this over and over again. It's got a great arrangement. The bum 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 vocals are pretty cute, but I'm losing interest. It goes into a strong chorus at the end, almost like Bowie's coming in and said, you need a strong chorus, and how about something like this? And he suggested this, and suddenly it's lifted up at the end, giving you the impression that the song's a lot better than it is. Wasn't impressed by that one at all. Then we get into a tune called Wagon Wheel, and again, this is pointing backwards. It sounds like sort of early rock and roll, quite cheesy, that there was a lot of that in the early 70s. There was a lot of nostalgia, which led to things like Happy Days and Grease, a lot of nostalgia, I think, for a group of musicians who had grown up listening to that music and were now having success and wanted to point back to that music. The arrangement's great. I feel, again, Bowie's sense of melody creeping into this at certain points. But I thought those of you who going, Andy's not analysing the lyrics, he doesn't understand. He's critiquing a songwriter based upon the music first. That's what I am doing. That's part of my shtick. But I have got the lyrics here. So let's have a little bit of an analysis of this tune. I've just picked it at random. I thought, I've got less to say because this seemed to be repeating itself. So I went and grabbed the lyrics. And I haven't read them. I'm going to read them out now to you and see what I think. Yeah, you got to live, your life as though you're number one. Yeah, you've got to live, your life and make a point of having some fun. It's pretty hedonistic, isn't it? Not the most deep and meaningful lyrics, I don't think. That's the chorus. Before that, he says, which I missed out because I haven't got my docs, so I can't blame that. Won't you be my wagon wheel? Won't you tell me, baby, how do you feel? Now, wagon wheel, of course, is on the side of a bloody wagon, isn't it? In America, they got a covered wagon. In the UK, a wagon wheel is obviously a big chocolatey snack, which is bloody delicious. It's a delicious snack. It's almost like a chocolatey meal in itself, especially in the 70s when you were about 7 or 8 years old. So, if someone was my wagon wheel, that has a completely different, I don't want someone to be just a bloody wagon wheel off a wagon. I want them to be a wagon wheel as in bloody the chocolatey snack, So I'm very confused by all this, to be honest. And I wish, with my, art training and my ability to find meaning in things where it's not there, that sort of thing. I don't get much from this. Here's the post-chorus. But if you think that you get kicks from flirting with danger, just kick it in the head and rearrange her. So I think he's sort of going, hedonism's great, but I don't know. And it all seems a bit dodgy to me, that last line. Just kick her in the head and rearrange her. Next verse. Oh, Heavenly Father, what can I do? What she's done to me is making me crazy. Oh, Heavenly Father, I know I have sinned, but look where I've been. It's making me lazy. I don't know. I can't get any. Maybe I'm too thick for Lou Reed. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe I don't get this type of poetry. Shall we just move on? Because the album does lift then, because we get this real short tune called New York Telephone Conversation. It's almost like a little comedy tune. It's very sweet. It's probably my favourite thing on here. It's silly and quirky and sweet. And there's a side of Lou Reed that I like, but I have to be honest, we are pointing to this sort of New York thing going on, which I just don't get because I'm a British bloke, you know. And, New York's a cool places where cool people live, you know. And if you're talking about being in New York, then you're talking about being cool and wearing dark sunglasses and going to Central Park and walking around with your little dog on a bloody string and things like that, you know, on your little lead, you know, hanging out with, you know, all the sort of artsy-fartsy types, you know. The type of thing, you know, being just cool. And there's a coolness, and I'm supposed to bow down to the coolness, and I don't. I'd rather have some progressive rock musicians singing about two old ladies outside a church. Are ye Genesis on nursery crime? You know, I'd rather have that. Maybe it's me, but that doesn't have a pretense at trying to be cool. It actually, it tries to show you beauty in the mundane, which this does as well. But I can't help but just thinking that they know they're bloody cool. Right, then we get the happy clappy song, I'm So Free. The verse comes in, the music gets a little bit darker. Again, this would be rubbish without the arrangement. Reed's talky vocal approach actually kills the melodic possibilities. This is what I'm starting to see here. This continually Rex Harrison talking is making this sound less melodic than it could. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe I'm just not cool and don't appreciate the lack of musicality. You know, I think there's something in Bob Dylan's music, there's something in Neil Young's music, in Patti Smith's music, all this stuff that I'm not cool enough to get. I think part of it is I'm supposed to appreciate the lack of musicality because it points to something else. He can sing about hedonism as much as he likes, but there's not much actual hedonism on this album. Mick Ronson comes and actually plays some guitar on it, absolutely great. I put here, that metropolitan New York knowing growl is a bit pretentious. That's my response to this, right? Then we get Good Night, the last tune on here. And I put, it's Lou Reed's umpire ending, benefiting from Herbie Flowers' tuba. Ronnie Ross comes on and he plays some soprano saxophone. And I think who else? Oh, yeah, Trevor Bolder, Uriah Heep's bass player. He comes on and plays some trumpet on here. So we basically have, hidden within this track, we have a New Orleans front line. Not clarinet, but soprano sax. Sounds very similar. Soprano sax, tuba, and trumpet. And it's interesting that at this point, this is brought in to underpin Lou Reed's songwriting. And that approach makes his songwriting more musical. And I felt the orchestral arrangements on Harvey's by Neil Young did the same thing. That there are some good songs in here, and these are quite conservative, normal songs that would benefit from more musicality. But with Lou Reed, that musicality is coming out of something very, very old. And it's not New Orleans jazz. It's a sort of nod to New Orleans jazz, but in a much sort of angular, quirky way. And then a key to a lock emerged on this final track for me. And I suddenly thought, Kurt Weill. Lou Reed is basically pulling from Kurt Weill, who I don't like. I know he's brilliant, but I don't like Mac the Knife and all that stuff. I don't like it. Why? Because it is lacking aspects that are in rock and roll, that are in blues, that are in soul and funk, which are in jazz. It goes against that. He uses that, but in a sort of Brechterian way, which utilises alienation for you to focus more on what it's about. But what is this about? I don't know. Kurt Weill's stuff was about stuff specific and it had a political intent. The political intent here is perhaps postmodern. I think at the bottom of this, I think that all this stuff is pointing to nothing. That at the heart of this album, there is a shallow pretension. Now, I Googled this, and I didn't know that this is quite a famous statement that Lou Reed, once said, "I want to be the rock and roll Kurt Weill." Well, if that's the case, he achieves this on this album. So what do we have here? We have a good album benefiting from the team put around it. David Bowie's production, which was his choice of Ken Scott in terms of the sound of the album and his choice of the characters that populate this album, and his ability to see what is a very English take on an American Tin Pan Alley songwriter, which actually then supports this aesthetic, which is very similar to Kurt Weill, mirroring sort of American music forms like jazz, but in this very political way. All this is about, I think fundamentally, there is no heart to this music. And the shadow of Andy Warhol hanging over the whole thing really is the aesthetic here. Now, Lou Reed may not have been that, and he may have been his own man, and he may have been a great songwriter like this one guy, whatever his name was, can't remember, from Rolling Stone. He believed that he was. I'm not so sure, don't know. But whatever the answer is, when you start to boil down this album, right, for all the little things that are very pleasant in a twee and naff way, to be honest, but once we get past those what really are nice little pop touches, what do we have really? And I do believe there's a lack of substance here. Now, albums can lack substance when you boil down to them. Most disco albums have no great meaning underneath. There's no artistic intent. They are just frilly nice pop, treats. And I think what we have here is that. And twice they hit gold. Walk on the Wild Side is so iconic. But really? And Perfect Day is profound. And Perfect Day seems to stick out in a way that none of the rest of the albums like that. I don't know. I don't know. There is a lilt to Perfect Day in the songwriting, which is genius. There is a subtlety to the lyrics where this can be read on a number of levels, a sort of perfect day of someone just spending it with someone and having this one day. I watched the film AI last night, and Artificial Intelligence, the Spielberg film, and that ending where he gets to spend that perfect day. And I had that in my mind when I listened to that, and I thought that itself, that your perfect day is almost like, if you could achieve that, when you live your life, there is that day you have. It's the best day you have ever had in your whole life. You don't know when you've had it. That's quite profound. And when I think about that and a song being about that, now we can say, oh, yeah, but it's really about heroin addiction and blah, 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 and all that type of thing. Well, that gives it an edge, but I don't think that's where the sublime awe is. But when I think of that, that is great songwriting. When I get that feeling, and I'm hopefully, maybe you think, yeah, have you lived your perfect day? And if we get to live our perfect day, whether we live for 20 years or for 100 years, if we get to do that, then did we not achieve what we set out to do? And there's no more we can do than that. Well, you could have another perfect day. No, you can't. There is that one day. And the idea that exists, do we know it? And the idea that we don't know when but he does. As soon as I boil down into that tune, Perfect Day, and then I think of the way he's written it musically, and the twists and turns up to that rousing chorus, and then that outro, you're going to reap what you sow, which sounds like a threat, but it also is a blessing in a way, depending on how we live our life. This is powerful stuff. Now, I wish I could do that for the other songs on here, but I don't think that that's the case. So, that's my video. And I want to finish up with this. I don't believe you can live your perfect day. I don't believe I can make the perfect video. I've come in here. I don't normally film at this time, and the sun's been going down as I've been filming this. I've got my clip-on mic, and hopefully, you know, as you can see, got clip-on mic there. That has created, you know, but then I've just looked as I've got to the end, and I haven't plugged the mic in. So this, as I come to the end of the video, I realise is just the camera audio, and it's going to have to be that. Bugger. But does that add some meaning? When people moan about the quality of the audio, I think, well, yeah, I know all that. But what about the content of the video? You know, put up with a bit of bad audio, but, you know, maybe I'm saying something that's interesting. Maybe you could just forego that and just, you know, I could spend hours trying to make the audio sound right, but what good does that do? Does it make the bloody thing any better? Yeah, you've had to listen to a bit tinny vocal, you know. You know, that's that, you know, it's not that bad, you know. That is the opposite of what we have here. Except for Perfect Day. Oh, I've got to the end. I regret that now. I almost want to start again and do it again with the mic, but I'll never capture what I've said again. I'll never be able to do that. This is a one-off. It's like live. Yeah. I have to end with this. Perfect Day is bloody amazing. Rest of it is okay. Thanks for watching.